chaotic culture, that's the world we living in. So what's the word?
Nothing like good old H2O. Trust me, I'm going to need it this episode. Anyway, good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gents, and welcome to another edition of the Chaotic Culture Podcast, the pod where chaos rules and Black culture is supreme. The Chaotic Culture Podcast is brought to you by W Energy, the official energy sponsor of the KKP. Use promo code Chaotic Culture 1 to get 10% off your favorite energy flavor. The Chaotic Culture Podcast is also brought to you by Patreon.com. Go to patreon.com/Chaotic Culture Pod to hear episodes early and to get bonus content from the pod. You can subscribe for as low as $3 a month. Once again, thank you for the support. This episode is going to be very special and near and dear to my heart, and I hope that you will all enjoy my takes, whether they are hot or cold, and hopefully you will appreciate my perspective. So, live from the 410, I am the host and the creator of the Chaotic Culture Podcast. This is your boy, Ked the Pro, a.k.a. the Calculated Millennial, a.k.a. the Encore Presentation.
Can I get an encore? Do you want more?
A.k.a. your favorite toxic adjacent king, Ked the Poet, Ked the Closer, all that good stuff. The 843 is me. Baltimore's the place to be. Always chaotic, never toxic most days. Back again, once again, with your favorite Black culture highlights and Black culture shenanigans. So, today's topic is a bit different. Now, I say this all the time that we are not strictly a music podcast or strictly a hip-hop podcast. However, hip-hop plays a vital role in the lives of Black people from Gen X all the way to Gen Alpha. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the crazy year that we had in hip-hop. So join me as I go through my personal top 25 hip-hop albums of 2024. As you know, I live and breathe hip-hop music. This is something that has been near and dear to my heart since my brother first introduced me to hip-hop at the tender age of 3. I just remember some of the first words to ever leave my mouth were Boom Shakalaka from the song Chief Rocker by Lords of the Underground. And of course, Hey Ho from Hip Hop Hooray by Naughty by Nature. And as I grew up in a conscious and progressive household, I am a big lover of conscious hip hop. That is not to say that I don't love, the party music, bangers, and the like. Music can be played in the club is music that I truly enjoy. After all, hip hop was founded with both elements of consciousness and partying, and without those, you don't get a genre that has expanded and grown within ways beyond our imagination for the last 50 plus years. You can't mention the Last Poets and Gil Scott-Heron without mentioning, that infamous party held by DJ Kool Herc in 1973. In the same breath, we can't mention Rapper's Delight and Sugar Hill Gang without mentioning The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. That being said, the top 25 hip hop albums of 2024 is a list of phenomenal music that is not limited to just bops and bangers, from the sound to the engineering to the way it touches my soul, and of course the lyricism. I personally cannot listen to turn up music 24/7. I want to be able to have all forms of the genre. Hip hop I can party to as a form of escapism, hip hop I can vibe to, and hip hop that changes my way of thinking and challenges my way of thinking. I know you have probably seen multiple video essays that describe the foundations of hip hop, and I'm not going to harp on them too much. However, I just want to point out that the party within hip hop developed because of the struggle, and it's something that still exists today, especially among Black people. And we as hip hop lovers, especially Black people who love hip hop, need to gatekeep and eject the very people who will degrade hip hop due to their lack of understanding or ulterior motives to help dumb down the masses. And for example, and I cannot believe that I'm about to bring this up, but the clown from On the Radar who essentially called Soul Samples unk shit and to not play it around him, the tweets that called Kendrick Lamar's music protest music, and the girl who called Doechie's music Harriet Tubman music. All of those people who have those opinions are posers and people who do not like hip hop music and only like palatable pop rap. And look, there's nothing wrong with just liking pop shit. However, your view of hip hop is skewed and biased, and your opinion of the culture is in no way, shape, or form valid. Any person who doesn't want their hip hop to make them think too much, quote unquote, is someone who cannot be in the same room as true hip hop lovers and will not and cannot have a validated opinion on this art form. Now that I've addressed that situation, let's talk about the year in hip hop and why it was so important. So, in 2023, we celebrated 50 years of hip hop. While we got some pretty good albums like, Sundial by No Name, Call Me If You Get Lost, The Estate Sale by Tyler the Creator, and Michael by Killer Mike, which ended up sweeping the rap Grammys. The biggest sales obviously came from For All the Dogs by Drake, which to me is not his worst album, but was still pretty bad. Despite it being the 50th anniversary of hip hop, though, 2023 was not the strongest year in hip hop. In fact, you could say there was a notable decline in the genre, but 2024 provided a promising outlook for hip hop, starting, of course, with a huge spark from Megan Thee Stallion dropping the song Hiss. This turned out to be one of many diss tracks throughout the year. And this one, which she doesn't really say any names, but most of the track can be assumed it is directed at Drake and Tory Lanez. Though it seems one Onika Tanya Mirage Petty, aka Nicki Minaj, took Megan's words to heart. A hit dog will holler. And dropped the diss track Bigfoot, which is probably the worst or second worst diss track this year, depending on who you ask, and was universally panned by everyone except the Barbs. Fast forward to March 22nd, Future and Metro Boomin dropped their first collab album of the year, We Don't Trust You, and included a feature from Kendrick Lamar on the song Like That, in which Kendrick took some shots at Cole, but the biggest shots aimed at Drake. This verse was the proverbial nuke that hip hop needed. And from this point on, all eyes were on the big three to see what would happen next. You could say this song helped launch the biggest feud in hip hop in the last 20 years, or I guess rather relaunch, since Kendrick and Drake have been subbing each other since Drake took offense to the Control verse back in 2013. Yeah, semantics. Cole would be the first to respond to Kendrick with 7 Minute Drill, and then would later back out of the beef by apologizing at the Dreamville Fest and deleting the track from his LP, Might Delete Later. More on that later. Throughout the months of April and May, this became focused on Dot and Drizzy. And Dot and Drizzy would, at this stage, trade diss tracks, with Drake responding to Like That with Push Ups 3 weeks later. Side note, an unfinished version of Push Ups was leaked to the public. Then Drake would have the official response hours later, then drop it on platforms a week afterwards. Drake would then follow up with Tailor Made Freestyle, which included an AI voiceover of Tupac and Snoop in order to troll Kendrick to drop within the 17 days that Kendrick didn't respond. This would prove to be one of 3 fatal mistakes Drake would make in this battle. The second one being he decided to include Kendrick's family into this by mentioning Whitney and Push Ups, and then doubling down on this later. Tupac's estate, of course, did not appreciate the tailor-made freestyle and forced Drake to take it down. Kendrick would then respond on a random Tuesday morning on April 30th with Euphoria, which is still severely underrated in my opinion, and was essentially a lyrical dissection of Drake, telling him that he can predict what Drake would do next, but also a warning to keep it rap and keep his family out of it. Dot then responded with 616 in LA on IG the morning of May 3rd, letting Drake know his camp is not tight and he should be prepared for what happens next if it goes a certain route. That night, Drake would drop a prelude on YouTube called Buried Alive Part 2 in reference to the Buried Alive interview Kendrick had on Drake's album Take Care, and then pressed his red button and dropped Family Matters, which attacked multiple people, but also attacked Kendrick and his family by saying one of the kids isn't his, but his best friend's, that he is a domestic abuser, and of course that slave bar, which aged terribly, which That was the third mistake. Not even half an hour later, Kendrick would respond with Meet the Grams, which might be one of the biggest character assassinations I have ever heard on Wax, alleged daughter aside. On May 4th, Dot would follow up with Not Like Us, which ended up being the biggest song commercially out of the beef, with Kendrick leaning into Drake and his team being predators and PDF files, and Drake being a colonizer in hip hop. Drake would then respond with The Heart Part 6, which honestly might be the worst or second worst diss song in 2024. Again, second, maybe only the Bigfoot, depending on who you ask. And the battle would pretty much conclude with Kendrick seen as the victor. This beef, in my opinion, truly gave a spark to the genre this year, but the feud itself was only a portion of the great music that was released this year. And yet, one thing the beef did do was put more eyes on the West Coast scene, especially with Kendrick doing the Pop Out show on Juneteenth and including plenty of West Coast acts that were either little known, unknown, or had not been seen in a while. And in such a crazy year, the West Coast had a lot to say this year. But the West was not the only region that showed up. The South still had something to say. NY, though currently bogged down in the NY drill scene, still had some heavy hitters come through, and the Midwest showed it was hanging too. This year, we see hip hop leaning back into its regional sounds, which has been a trend for quite some time in such a saturated market. But this might also be the reason why we may never see hip hop acts that transcend regions as Kendrick, Drake, and Cole. At least we won't see it for a while anyway. Who knows? A huge star could pop out of nowhere and finally be crowned the next man or woman up. But one thing I did also want to say was that this was also a year that was dominated by the rap girlies, which, in my opinion, outside of the big three, are the current leaders of hip hop music. Glorilla, Megan, Lotto, Doechii, Rhapsody, Flo Milli, Shay Noir, Little Sims out of the UK, Tierra Whack, hell, even Ice Spice and Sexy Red all had something to say and were at the forefront of the culture. So, with that being said, let's do a little deep dive into my top hip hop albums of 2024. Now, I got to start off with this album. Before we begin the actual list, these are some honorable mentions for the year, by the way. Starting with The Death of Slim Shady, Coup de Grace by Eminem. Where do I start with this one? I know some of y'all M fans might be looking at me a little crazy, wondering why the hell this album didn't even make my top 25. Well, to be honest, while this is M's best efforts in a long time, and M is as non-PC as he ever is, it still was not better than any of the projects that I listened to this year that are on the top 25. But this is just my opinion. I will say M's lyricism is still crazy in songs like, Toby, Temporary, Renaissance, Fuel, and the subsequent remix, and Somebody Save Me are important to this album. But the concept of killing off Slim Shady just to say Slim isn't really dead and really going anywhere and we kind of have to deal with it, it feels like the album missed the plot. And Anthony Fantano made a solid point with this during his review, and I gotta say I agree. However, it is still better than a lot of his most recent projects. And, for that, this album does get high praise, but it missed my top 25. So I'm sorry, guys. It is what it is. Another album that was like extremely, extremely good, but doesn't make my list, albeit for more personal reasons, is Everybody Can't Go by Benny the Butcher. This album, which is Benny's first under a major label, which would be 5 for 50 and Def Jam, was well put together with different songs revolving around the rags to riches stories and tales of the street. Jermaine's Graduation, Big Dog, which had an incredible feature from Lil Wayne, Back Again with Snoop, and Griselda Express with Conway the Machine, and of course West Side Gun. Those are some of the standout tracks for this album. Benny, who is a member of the Griselda Collective, it was one of my favorite rappers at the time. However, what keeps me from posting this on my top 25 list, again, is more of a personal reason. I find myself hard to believe that a rapper, or really any rapper for that matter, who often details the struggles of drug dealing and subsequent come up, would just oppose themselves by supporting a person who was known for his racist practices and keeping black folks out of his apartment buildings. Nevertheless, he isn't the only rapper who supports the former and now incoming president, but Benny's support of 45/47 is the reason why I cannot, in good faith, just put this album on this list. I'm sorry. But speaking of Griselda, it is worth checking out Still Praying from West Side Gun and Slant Face Killer by Conway the Machine. Two very solid projects from Griselda, and if you haven't checked them out, you should. I know not too many people prefer Gun's delivery, but his projects are always solid, and Conway continues to be the workhorse of Griselda, and I think he has taken over as my favorite out of the collective, politics aside. So Smino actually dropped a project late this year called Maybe in Nirvana, which was music he wrote and recorded during the pandemic. Now, while I think this album is good, unfortunately, it doesn't reach the heights of his earlier works like Black Swan and Noir. To be honest, I would probably even take Love for Rent over this project. But again, it's very solid and very enjoyable, even if a little short. One album that I thought was way too short and should have made my list, but didn't because it was too short, was Cadillac Leather in July by Dear Silas. But this project was well done, and Dear Silas has found a pocket and flow that is not easily duplicated. Dear Silas continues to show off his multiple talents, with Out the Way, Meekleton, and Mood being the standout tracks. And this album is definitely worth the listen, although just bear in mind it is under 30 minutes. So there's that. A UK artist people should pay attention to, if you haven't already, is Little Sims, and her album Drop 7. Now, for context, the kind of rap she does is a very experimental and grunge at times, but this album had more elements of house music / electronic sounds to it. And also, again, the album is very short, sweet, and well put together, and would recommend her to anyone who is looking to branch out of that American rap scene. Going back to Chicago, I got to give some props to Chief Keef and Almighty So too. I think it was a well-done project from Sosa, though admittedly, again, I don't often revisit this project since I'm not the biggest fan of drill music, but Keef shows he can still make music with the best of them, and this was a solid project. Moving to the West Coast, an album that I had almost missed but glad that I caught was Love, The Ominous World by Blue in Exile. Blue in Exile always come together and make great albums, with this still not being the exception. It follows the rule of great sounds from them. California had a lot to say this year, and Blue shows that he and Exile are still a great duo. This album details Blue's experience as an LA rapper and still shows he can spit with the best of them. While this album doesn't reach like the same heights as like Beyond the Heavens, which was a really, really great album by them, it's still a very good project and worth the listen. Another great project that's worth the listen is Don't Forget to Breathe by Buddy. Now, Buddy is one of the more slept on West Coast rappers, but Buddy brings a certain flair and range that I haven't seen from too many West Coast artists. The Harlan and Alondra rapper makes a point to make this album about self-love, taking moments to breathe and, to remember what's important. Talk About It with Kent Jams and BJ, the Chicago Kid, is my favorite track off this album. And he has other tracks like the intro track, Free My Mind, the final track, You to Thank, Should Have Known with Smino and Cedric, and Smoke with Garen. So overall, this was one of my personal favorites that also just missed my top 25, but would make my proverbial top 30 if I decided to do a top 30. Back to the East Coast. Another good project worth listening to is Mother and Gun by 38 Spesh. Although quick, this album details Spesh's growing up and how his mother tried to provide for him during his childhood, and how also both of them ended up being locked up on top of that. The only thing I have trouble with is Spesh's delivery and his cadence. It really doesn't fit my taste, but it was still a decent project nonetheless. Some quick albums here you should definitely check out if you haven't already. I think Marciology by Rock Marciano was really special and is on a lot of websites' top 10. Sugar Honey Iced Tea by Lotto definitely has some bangers and fun tracks on there, like Sunday Service, Brokey, Big Mama, and Squeeze. Not really an album, but Chez Noir's The Colored Chocolate Volume 1 is a great 4-song EP. And if you aren't familiar with her, I highly, highly recommend checking out this project. She did drop a full LP called The Lotus Child. However, I had not had the opportunity to check it out. But if it's just as good as her EP, I know I'm in for a treat. Big X the Plug dropped a really dope album called Take Care, and I think it is criminally underrated how good Big X is. The only issue I have is that he doesn't change up his flow or style on any of his songs, and for what it's worth, I mean, that's okay. The album is only 30 minutes long, so it doesn't overstay its welcome, but I know for me, I love when rappers don't just adopt the same flow or same style every single song they do, which is why this also misses my list. However, his subject matter is still solid, and the samples he uses are phenomenal, even if they are virtually the same beat. A good album that also just missed my list but made the top 10 of Rolling Stone's hip-hop list is Sa Baby with his album Sahim. Sa Baby really has some interesting lyrics and topics, but he adopts that current Atlanta wave of rhyming, that triplet scheme, which admittedly I despise because I think rappers use it way too much and the market is oversaturated with the same kind of flow. But for what it is still a really well done project, and you should give it a thorough listen. An album that just misses my top 5 and would be in like the proverbial 28th spot was Please Don't Cry by Rhapsody. Now, this album is filled with a lot of trauma and healing, and sometimes it felt that Rhapsody might be overthinking it at times a bit, but I can't speak for her trauma, only she can. And I think this was an album for her, and hopefully it provided a sense of healing for her. The music, while not as captivating as her last album, Eve, was still very poignant and direct. And songs like God's Light, 3 a.m., Lonely Woman, Raw, and A Ballad for Homegirls are some of my favorite tracks on this album. Moving to Atlanta real quick, a great album that also just missed my top 25 and would be my number 27 if I was doing a top 30 is Perfect Fantasy by Earth Gang. This is the duo's first project after leaving Interscope, and that doesn't mean they've left Dreamville. They are still with Dreamville, and they prove once again that they still make great music. From start to finish, this album is worth listening to, and some standout tracks include, Bobby Boucher, Blacklight, Die Today, Love You More with T-Pain, Osmosis, and the titular track Perfect Fantasy with Snoop Dogg. If you haven't heard of Earth Gang by now, please be sure that you tap in. I've been a fan of theirs since I attended Hampton University with them and even did some acting scenes with Dr. Dot, aka Wild Great. One album that I want to talk about that was number 25, but just got bumped off as recently as like yesterday is Might Delete Later by J. Cole. I know, but hear me out. Honestly, this might have gotten more love from me if Cole had kept 7-Minute Drill on the album, but he decided to remove it. And while that didn't devalue the sound of the album, it hurt my opinion of it. Despite that decision, Might Delete Later shows us that Cole is still an elite lyricist and uses this LP as a teaser for his upcoming retirement album, if it ever releases, called The Fall Off. As far as the rest of the tracks, Pricey is a good opener. Ready for 24 with Cameron was cool. HYB was decent, and my personal favorite is Pie with Daylight and Absol. And truth be told, knowing these two are close to K-Dot is probably another reason why Cole removed the disc, but I'm just speculating at this point. I think for a project, it was good, though for a Cole project, it is probably one of his weaker ones, but his lyricism is still pretty good, and he still shows why he is one of the top rap artists out there. But since this is not his strongest project, and because he deleted the disc, is why the project just misses my top 25. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the top 25. Let's go. Let's get it. Starting off this list is actually a late entry, but at number 5, we have Killer Mike's new album, Michael and the Mighty Midnight Revival, Songs for Sinners and Saints. This album plays like a gospel album, but with enough cussing that it won't be considered for that category. However, the God-loving man in me truly loved this album and probably would rank this higher if it wasn't a late entry and I had the rest of my list set. But hip-hop has a very weird way to invoke different reactions, and Mike taps into his faith to give us a rap revival album where he speaks not only how his faith in the Almighty has kept him in general, but also how his faith in God keeps him grounded despite his struggles being a leader in hip-hop and politics, his arrest at the Grammys, and some other family issues. Nobody Knows with Anthony Hamilton is a real gem. Humble Me is an amazing track about God keeping him humble, and Exit 9 Scenic Route is a song to celebrate his faith and giving thanks for his accomplishments. Summer for Junkies, the longest track on the album, might be the most important as it details a lot of the struggles Mike has seen and continues to experience within his family. I really enjoyed this and highly recommend this album to you. It's only number 25 because it's such a late entry to my list, and it, later on it might deserve a top 15 recognition. At number 24, we have American Dream by 21 Savage. I think this is a very solid project by 21, and for the start of the year, I thoroughly enjoyed what I heard. Tracks like Red Rum, Red Sky, Prove It with Summer, lacing the tracks with her beautiful vocals, and Should Have Wore a Bonnet are tracks that stuck out to me personally. Now, the reason this album didn't get higher than 24 is that after March, this album didn't get a ton of replay from me. I feel that while this was a good album, I had a better time digesting I Was than this particular project, but 21 continues to prove his raps are still potent and that he transcends most of his peers in the 2016 freshman class. At number 23, we have Samurai by Lupe Fiasco. Not much to say about this album. Lupe's pen once again shows it is one of the best, if not the best, in the game. Sonically, you can hear the traditional melodic sounds you would commonly hear in Asian countries or albums. And based on the way this album is structured, I feel there was some Nujabes, Outkast, and Wu-Tang influence all mixed in throughout this project. I personally wanted a longer project from Lupe, but I still loved the album all the same. Samurai, the first track, is a great start to the album, and Mumble Rap is such a great follow-up with such a great story behind it. And the lyricism on Cake, sorry, I had to drink my water on that one. Sheesh. What's even more interesting is that Lupe doesn't cuss a lot on this album. Out of the 8 songs, only 3 of them have strong language, which is a testament to Lupe's lyricism. Seriously, like, if you haven't listened to this album, be sure you do so. The only downside of this album is that the hooks aren't the best, which I get it. Lupe is not a hook or chorus kind of guy, but it's still, the chorus and the hook are still, valuable parts of the song, and they add value. So the album is a bit short. On top of that, again, only 8 tracks. Still worth being in my top 25. Still worth the listen. Now, I know what you're saying because there are other tracks that I did not have on here that were shorter, and they probably were just, they might have been 8 tracks or anything like that. But the thing is that it's 8 tracks, but it's still a 30-minute LP as opposed to something that was 10 tracks in like less than 20 minutes. So I just wanted to be sure I put that out there. At number 22, we have Bando Stone and the New World by Childish Gambino. Reportedly, Gambino's last album, unsure if that's true or not. Donald Glover shows he can still make excellent music with the best of them. While this is not Gambino's strongest album, it is still very enjoyable music nonetheless, from his unique singing and rock elements on the track Lithonia to the psychedelic sounds in Survive with Chloe Bailey to the Atlanta-based sound in Talk My Shit with Amaray, I think that's how you pronounce it, and of course the ever colorful Flo Milli, to perhaps the track that got the most attention for the shots it took at Drake, aka Yoshinoya. From start to finish, this album plays like a soundtrack to a movie, which I believe is the purpose, as that is the title of his upcoming film. But just like a soundtrack album, sometimes the album can come across as like not cohesive. There are times where, because each track has a different feel, that it feels like the album or the songs within the album just don't blend. But ultimately, I do want to save most of that criticism until the movie comes out. So I want to see how it ties in with the upcoming film. But still, overall, good album. At number 21, we have an album from Skyzoo called Keep Me Company. Now, this is my another late entry because this album wasn't even on my radar until I saw a post on social media saying Skyzoo had an incredible album. And I just remember being so upset because I found out so late. Like, why am I just now finding out that Skyzoo dropped an album? I love Skyzoo. But anyway, if you are familiar with him, Skyzoo is a Brooklyn rapper who grew up down the street from where Biggie resided and has been around since the early 2000s on the mixtape scene. I personally love this album from Skyzoo, and I might be lowballing it at number 21, but again, because I just recently listened to it, I have to take some more time to digest it. But because I loved it on first listen is why I must inject this album immediately into the top 25. The sounds of this album include a lot of jazzy and boom bap sounds, the sounds that define hip hop. Looking at you, colonizers, or unk shit, as what the colonizers will call it. But I love the honesty, the introspective, and thought-provoking lyrics on this album. Community service, finders keepers, home away from home, prayers for the customers are just some of the tracks that will have you invested in Skyzoo's rhymes and stories. My personal favorite is Record Store Day. It's a playoff Jay-Z song Girls from the Blueprint, except he's detailing his experience about a girl who loves hitting up the record store as much as he does and how he wants to connect deeply with this girl. And honestly, Skyzoo, same. I need one of those, know what I'm saying? Overall, great album, worth a listen, and I will definitely be revisiting this album. Another late entry at number 20, we have Hustle Music by Payroll Giovanni. The Detroit native from Doughboys Cash Out really crafted a great album. And while the lyrics are often not unique in terms of subject matter, having money, hustling, life on the block, finding love, and more songs about getting money, what truly makes this album worth the listen is the production. I cannot speak enough. Cookin' Soul is the producer on this album, and he absolutely laced these tracks with beautiful instrumentals and samples. The tracks feel like something out of a late 80s, early 90s R&B album, and I was absolutely captivated by Soul's production combined with Payroll's braggadocio and Detroit flair. The album will have you paying attention from start to finish, and some of the favorite tracks of mine include Hustle Music 5, Woke Up and Bought a Benz, Deeply Involved, Life of a Hustler, Be Like Jay, and Dealership. Coming in at the 19th spot is You Only Die Once by Freddie Gibbs. If you've paid attention to Freddie's albums, this is a follow-up to his LP, You Only Live Twice. This time, instead of having God's blessing as he did in the first LP, he's dealing with the temptations of the devil himself. Freddie finds himself battling his demons and vices while keeping the biggest demon himself off his back. Songs like Cosmo Freestyle, Wolverine, Brick Fees, and Walk It Off are my favorite tracks on this project. And if you can't already tell, I am a huge fan of these kinds of albums that depict inner struggles and fighting your demons and things of that nature. Also, Freddie Gibbs just doesn't drop bad albums, and he continues that streak here. So big shout out to Freddie Gibbs. If you have not listened to this album, please do yourself a favor and do so. Coming in at number 18, we have Larry June's album Doing It For Me. Now, Larry will always be in rotation in my speakers, whether it's his mellow voice, the mellow beats, or just the downright combination of the vibe he brings to every project. Larry June laces this album with signature laid-back flow and beats you can just cruise to. The album starts off with a motivational word from his Uncle Herm once again, and the album just goes into detail about his lifestyle and the lavish things he enjoys. From morning calculations, which details his routine and how he grinds, to the girls he likes in a little while, to the beautiful sounds and vibe on Breakfast in Gold Coast. Larry June just doesn't miss often, and frankly, in my mind, doesn't miss at all. So if you have not checked out Doing It For Me, please be sure that you do so. At number 17, we have our first rap girly in Megan Thee Stallion and her album Megan. There's really no need to go into too much detail, but I enjoy the album from start to finish and is my opinion Megan's best full-length album. Now that she's independent and has creative control in her music, you can hear it in her music. Hiss, Rattle, Where Them Girls At, Otaku Hot Girl, Boa, Mamushi Wasta, Cobra, these are all hits. Spin is a very great deep cut. Downstairs DJ is not for me, but if you listen to the song, you can understand why. The only real miss she had on this album for me was the song Worthy. Now, I did not listen to Act 2 or list Act 2 on this because I feel like that is a deluxe, and I did not really add any deluxe albums to this list, which is why you won't see the 10th anniversary of J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hills Drive on here. But I think Megan really showed why she is one of the top rap girlies in the game, and she is only just getting started. So if you want to see my full reaction to the album when it first dropped, be sure you subscribe to Patreon at patreon.com/Chaotic Culture Pod. I will definitely be posting more album reactions on the Patreon as well. At number 16, we have the return of LL Cool J and the frequencies of real creative energy, or just the force. LL proves that if you got it, it never really goes away, and I think this album captures that energy. LL shows his fans that when the creative juices get flowing, it can produce something magical within the music. LL steps away from the smooth lover raps that would have your girl at his hotel room and goes back to his original b-boy roots from the mid-'80s and early 90s that caught everyone's attention. This album includes a lot of themes that include Black empowerment, Black faith, bringing back Black revolutionary mindsets, and of course, Black business moves. Saturday Night Special harps on this as it tells us not to trust everyone in your circle, especially if you know that they are crooked. Spirit of Cyrus, The Force, again, Saturday Night Special, Huey in the Chair, and The Vow are some of my favorites. And of course, LL still does give you that one track dedicated to the ladies with Proclivities featuring Saweetie. Most of the production here was done by the legendary Q-Tip, and while I think some of the production doesn't necessarily fit LL based on previous history, it's a fair assessment to say that this experimental sound was a nice refresher for LL, and he makes the most of it by giving us these gems of knowledge. And for real, if you haven't checked out this album, you would truly be missing out on some real knowledge from one of the four founders of modern hip hop. Big shout out to LL Cool J and this project. Coming in at number 15, we got We Don't Trust You by Future and Metro Boomin. Granted, this will probably be the highest I ever rate a Future album, but the sheer shockwave from this project cannot be understated or denied. This album ended up being the ticking time bomb for all of hip hop this year, and it could not have come at a better time. Future and Metro are a great duo, and their chemistry on this album elevates the album in a way that only these two could. So if you had another producer to try to emulate this sound between Future and Metro Boomin, I don't think it could be replicated. That's just my opinion of it. So aside from Like That, which we've talked about before in this video, this album includes bangers such as the titular track We Don't Trust You, Type Shit, Everyday Hustle, Young Metro, and deep cuts like Slimed In, Ice Attack, and Frob, She a Vibe. Not much else to say about this album. It did the job and gave hip-hop a well-needed spark. Now, in my personal opinion, this album is a lot better than We Don't Trust You 2, which is why I didn't include it in this, top 25, or didn't even include it in my honorable mentions. Though I will say We Don't Trust You 2 is still a decent listen. And if you like Future, that is a good album for you. Mixtape Pluto is also a very good mixtape, though I again didn't include it in this list because again I find myself not being again the biggest Future fan, though I love old Future, but like Future now, it kind of feels like he doesn't grow a lot with his music. Same for a certain rap artist who we're not going to talk about, or that we've already talked about. You already know who I'm talking about, aka The Boy. But still, I think Mixtape Pluto and We Don't Trust You 2 are some good listens. So if you haven't listened to those two tracks, or excuse me, 2 projects, please be sure that you do so. But for what it's worth, this one right here, We Don't Trust You, the first one, is worth the listen if you haven't caught on or haven't gotten a chance to listen to it yet for some odd reason. Another late entry to the list, but jumped all the way to number 14, is Shadowbox by Mavi. I was thoroughly surprised by this album and want to commend Mavi on a stellar project. If you aren't familiar with him, he is an artist from Charlotte, North Carolina. His first 2 projects, Let the Sun Talk and Laughing So Hard It Hurts, are very contemplative bodies of work, and this album follows that same trend. The album is very jazzy and smooth sounds, yet the lyrics jump out as very haunting and even more contemplative than his last one. Seriously, this album is full of anxiety, pain, loneliness after losing friends. It's a lot to unpack. If you are ever in the mood for an album to just ride through and contemplate things, this is an album for you. Some favorite standout tracks on here are 20,000 Leagues, Open Waters, Drunk Prayer, which, again, brace yourself for that one because that one is a heavy hitter, Testimony, and My Own Way. For number 13, we have Worldwide Whack by Tierra Whack. It's been 6 years since Tierra blessed us with a project, and I was glad to hear she dropped this year. While I wasn't the biggest fan of her sing rapping on this project, the subject matter on this album cuts through and still hits. Bouts of loneliness, pain, and dealing with the opposite sex are strung together in her songs, and it creates this album which at first may sound a bit like a kids bop album, but in truth is more of an open journal into Tierra's changing world. Tracks like Imaginary Friends give us an idea of how some of us as kids had these friends to keep us company, but her reasoning for her imaginary friends are to protect her from real people who have caused her pain or may have caused pain. Shower Song is a song that reflects how we all sing our favorite tracks when taking a shower, regardless if we are good singers or not. But this is used as a distraction for her bouts of loneliness. And if you don't mind rap singing, again, I think this album is a perfect display of someone who is trying to hold on to that childlike innocence they once had, but the realities of life rob that away from them at every turn. So definitely give this album a listen if you haven't. Coming in at number 12, we have JPEG Mafia's I Lay Down My Life for You. Now, I will admit I am not the biggest fan of Peggy, specifically his production. While others hail it as genius, I have often struggled with trying to grasp the concepts. His production oftentimes is all over the place and not structured to me, which ultimately may be the point that he's trying to get across, but it just doesn't work for me. However, this album is perhaps his best structured sonically. While the beats and productions are still heavy and laced with elements of alternative sounds and rock. Some tracks are also mixed with the soul samples that we're all accustomed to. The music doesn't jump all over the place, and it's easier to digest and follow along. Peggy once again layers these beats, of course, with his anti-establishment and anti-PC rhymes, but he also stays poignant and doesn't beat around the bush while even making tracks even more catchy with catchy hooks and catchy punchlines. Favorite tracks on this album, of course, include It's Dark and Hell is Hot, Nada DMX, New Black History with Vince Staples, JPEG Ultra with Denzel Curry, and Sin Miedo. We have another late entry into the top 25. This time, it's the legends Snoop and Dr. Dre with the album Missionary, coming in at number 11. Snoop and Dre once again tag team to bring us a very well put together album that I honestly was not expecting this year. Seriously, whatever is in the water of West Coast right now, just keep drinking it because it's working. Snoop and Dre show why they have been such a strong duo since the early 90s, and their chemistry together shows no signs of slowing up, even as elder statesmen in the game. From start to finish, this album did not have any skips for me, but some standout tracks include Shangri-La, Gorgeous with Jhené Aiko, Last Dance with Mary Jane, which with actually has two interesting features in Tom Petty and Jelly Roll. Another part of me featuring Sting, of all people. Sting, the legendary guitarist and music, not the legendary wrestler, guys. Let's calm down. Skyscrapers with Method Man and Smitty, the reggae-based Fire with Coco Sarai, Sticky Situation for obvious reasons, and Now or Never featuring BJ the Chicago Kid. Whew, we have finally reached our top 10. And I could not go anywhere without talking about the official debut album of Glorilla, with the album being, of course, titled Glorious. Yes, this album made my top 10, and rightfully so. Glow knows how to make anthems, but also knows how to catch your attention with the deep cuts too. The Memphis rapper continues to use her unique Southern drawl and Memphis accent to captivate you and keep you locked in. I fully admit I ran this album back a few times just because of how much I love it. Sue me. Procedure with Lotto goes. It really just goes like it's a banger, yo. Like TGIF, of course, was one of the top bangers of the year. What You Know About Me with Sexy Red also smacks. Don't Deserve with Mooney Long is a very underrated deep cut. Rain Down on Me with Kirk Franklin and Maverick City Music is in combination with Glow's Prayer, gives us Glow's vulnerable side and struggles with life as she looks to God for guidance. How I Look with Megan Thee Stallion, banger. Let Her Cook, banger. From top to bottom, this album deserves all the praise and then some more after that. So if you haven't listened to Glorious by Glorilla, what are you doing? Like, go listen to it. Like, not now, but right now. Know what I'm saying? Anyway, coming in at number 9, we have King of the Mischievous South, Volume 2 by Denzel Curry. Denzel once again capitalizes on his ability to make creative projects. And while this project isn't as in-depth as Melt My Eye, See Your Future, this mixtape pays homage to Memphis and Southern hip hop. Denzel also takes a different approach by making the lyrics more explosive and simplistic as opposed to the complex and intrinsic viewpoints that he had in his previous installment. And the guest features he has lined up on this tape are phenomenal. Denzel brings up Kingpin Skinny Pimp as the narrator for this project while he teams up with Kenyatta, 2 Chainz, Mike Dimes, Maxo Cream, ASAP Ferg, and ASAP Rocky, Tia Corinne, That Mexican OT, Juicy J, Project Pack, and the list of features goes on. If you haven't, please be sure that you check out this tape. Denzel even goes further beyond and re-released it with 4 new tracks, and some of my favorites include Ultra Shit, Black Flag, Freestyle, Sked, Cold Pimp with Juicy J and Ty Dolla $ign, G's Up, Wishlist with Armani White, and Hit the Floor with Ski Mask Slump God. So again, if you haven't checked out King of the Mischievous South, Volume 2, please be sure that you do so. You've got the original version, and then, of course, you got the one that has 4 tracks added to it this past November. Please be sure that you check it out. At number 8, we have the Grammy-nominated album, The Auditorium Volume 1 with Common and Pete Rock. It's no surprise we got such a comprehensive project from a legendary MC and legendary producer. This album was so smooth and just so fun to enjoy. Common, as a lyricist, still shows why he is still a top-tier lyricist, and his raps in conjunction with Pete Rock's production of boom bap and soul samples creates an album that deserved the Grammy nominations it received. What I really like about what Common and what any of the elder statesmen have done this year is that they have not tried to go outside what works for them. They don't follow trends. They aren't trying to make the latest TikTok bop, any of that. They are focusing on what works for them in their careers, and they are embracing the heart of hip hop instead of hopping out of their lanes and doing something that's, trending or the current wave. I would like to think that this style of hip hop is coming back, lyricism is coming back, and hip hop is resetting itself. This album is a good indicator of that reset and hopefully will inspire hip hop to embrace more of its roots. So, anyway, standout tracks on this one include Dreaming, Fortunate, So Many People with Bilal, A God There Is with Jennifer Hudson, All Kinds of Ideas with a verse from Pete Rock himself, and Everything's So Grand with PJ. All right, guys. This is where we're about to get a huge influx of West Coast hip hop artists, so be prepared. Clocking in at number 7 is Soul Burger from TDE's lyrical wizard Ab-Soul. This album feels very much like a part 2 to Solo's last album, Herbert, where he has these self-reflecting lyrics about his career, how far he's come, how he feels, how he hasn't gone far enough in his mind, but has the encouragement of his family and friends that, he's basically still one of them ones. And Soul's lyrics, punchlines, and triple entendres absolutely prove the latter statement. Solo has not lost a step and still shows why Kendrick looked up to him in his pen in their earlier years. The opening track, 9 Mile, uses the sample of the original Back to Life by Soul II Soul, which, if you've seen the movie Belly, if you know, you know, and ties in the samples of Shook Ones on top of that from Mobb Deep as well with that track. Soul still shows that hunger for more in the song and how he views himself in the rap game. All that featuring Jason Martin, formerly known as Problem, and Thirsty Pete is one of those West Coast songs you can vibe to in your car or do whatever gangsta walk you affiliated with. I don't bang, so I don't recommend that I do it, but if that's your wave, then by all means. California Dream with Vince Staples and Cam Carson is another great track that reduces production but focuses heavy on the lyricism. The track I, Myself, and Me is the track where a Solo spouse keeps it real with him and tells him he puts in the work and the work is showing, but he feels that he's running in place and not going anywhere. The track is laced with Doechie's singing voice and ad-libs, and I just really kind of wanted more from Doechii, but I know that she kind of just had a job to do, and so she did it. So there's that. Don Julio 70 is a hilarious back and forth with Fresh. As far as just drinking Don Julio, you gotta listen to the song. It's very funny, very hilarious, and still very, very witty, in my opinion. Squeeze First 2 was another showcase of Solo's lyrical ability, and Crazier with Jid is a great lyrical tug of war that I want to see more of as we enter 2025. Seriously, if you have not listened to this album, go listen. At number 6, we have The Crossroads by Cordae. Perhaps his most personal album since his debut album, The Lost Boy. Cordae, excuse me, goodness gracious. I don't want to call that boy Cordell. Good God. Cordae details this album with raps about his life currently and the changes he is experiencing. From detailing stories about his mom wanting to be an artist, to him becoming one and trying to make her and the family happy, to now being introduced to fatherhood and how this is changing his way of thinking. He realizes it's no longer his life he must be careful with. He now finds himself wanting to be that protector of his child and his baby mother. And, for those who don't know, the baby mother is tennis player Naomi Osaka. The production on this album has a very hopeful and somber tone mixed in, which is a blend of Cordae's past and present struggles and his hope for a bright future with his family. I think Cordae went in the right direction with this album, as his last project, From a Bird's Eye View, kind of just left me wanting more. This album shows Cordae's heart, his passions, his motivations, and most importantly, his skill as a rap artist. Standout tracks from this album include 06 Dream and Summer Drop with Anderson .Paak. And again, his chemistry with Anderson .Paak is undefeated. Nothing's Promised, which used the sample that was used from Kanye West's Heard Him Say. All Alone, Don't Walk Away, featuring Jordan Wood and Raven Lenae. Saturday Mornings with Lil Wayne, which is one of my personal favorites, by the way. Both of them go at it like they drop lyrical bombshells in that joint. Shy Afeni, which is an ode to his daughter. What Really Matters, which uses a sample of Wildflower. And listen, I'm a sucker for Wildflower samples. So yeah, I love this track. Syrup Sandwiches with Joey Badass, which is another lyrical track and a lyrical powerhouse. And of course, Two Tens with Anderson .Paak. I absolutely love this album by Cordae, and I cannot wait to hear more projects like this from him. Seriously, Cordae, keep up the good work. This album is not a flop by any stretch of the imagination, and anybody who tells you that, they're hating. And I'm just gonna say it. They haters, yo. Like they are absolute haters. If they tell you that this album was a flop and that it wasn't good, they are wrong. This album is phenomenal. All right. Before we get to the top 5, I just want to talk about a few albums I didn't get to and a few that did not make my list. I did not get a chance to get to Redman's Muddy Waters 2, but I do plan on listening, as I heard it was a great project from Redman, so that's definitely on my list. I'm currently in the middle of listening to rapper IDK's latest album, so if I feel that it's deserving to get on this list, or maybe a top 25 spot, I may revisit, but I'm still trying to get through that album. I also did not get to Ice Cube's album, and I probably won't if I'm being honest. I also have not listened to Flo Milli's album, Fine Ho Stay. A lot of Flo Milli's subject matter and lyrics, while good, are often like out there, even more so than the other rap girlies. But that's not to say that she can't go. Still, if you were expecting Big Sean's Better Me Than You up here, don't. While a decent album, Sean's music really doesn't capture my attention the way that it used to. Plus, I find the other rapper stories, especially like Cordae's stories of growth and fatherhood, to be way more compelling than what Sean was trying to do. And lastly, please do not expect Sexy Red or Ice Spice on this list. Seriously, I mean it. Don't do it. Those two projects were not good by any stretch of the imagination. Like, none at all. Like, don't do it. That's all I'm gonna say. That is all I'm gonna say. All right, guys, in the number 5 spot. I know it just looks like a black square, but trust me, that's an album cover. We have Dark Times by Vince Staples. What an incredible project from start to finish. Vince once again gives us an album of our dark reality as Black people, and especially those who live in Cali. Vince does his best to dissect the stark reality of systemic oppression, but also adds in his flair of how he fits in, considering he is now on the other side of fame. The tracks, while often dark, still provide catchy hooks and a mix of boom bap, West Coast, and even bounce beats that will keep you invested. This, in my opinion, might be some of his best work in a long time. And while Vince, who typically makes the music he wants to make, is not beholden to talk about the things that plague his people and that have often plagued his life, this album does a good job of explaining the situations of Black people and how we understand our plights, but typically fall back to those self-inflicting habits and routines that have often kept ourselves from reaching those new heights. So this album, once again, from top to bottom, is phenomenal, and my favorite tracks are Black and Blue, Government Cheese, Shame on the Devil, Etufe, Justin, Freeman, and Nothing Matters. At number 4, we stay in Cali, and we go back to TDE with Schoolboy Q's Blue Lips. I cannot rave enough about this album and how I think the Grammys really, and I mean really, missed the mark not giving this project any consideration. Seriously, like, Grammys, what are we doing? Do you not see this beautiful ass project? Like, come on, yo. Q comes back after his own 5-year hiatus with more motivation and a keener ear for the music. While the sample choices are already phenomenal, the beat switches are even more incredible and make the album's tone even more impressive. Like, sonically, this might be Q's best album outside of Blank Face LP. One of the things I enjoy about this album is not only the switches and production, but how Q matches the tone in each of these songs. You get the grimy, rough, and evil tone and pop to the effortless rioting the beat on Thank God for Me to the smooth, laid back, and contemplative raps on Blue Sides. And some songs like Foe and Ohio give you both smooth sounds and destructive wordplay. Big shout out to Absol and Freddie Gibbs, respectively. Q also gives us songs like Back in Love, which touch on his love for the rap game, Nunu, which talks about his love for the fans and how excited they are to hear him again, and Smile, which describes his overall happiness in life, come good or bad. Q has found what truly makes him happy, and this album is a testament to his growth as an artist who, as we know, went from being homeless and did not rap to one of TDE's powerhouses. Woo! Okay. Disclaimer. The top three, as far as their order, was very, very difficult to decide. The top three were locked in, but like trying to figure out the order of each album was very, very rough and very, very difficult. But I finally had to just make a decision. These three albums were the very best rap albums of 2024, bar none, outside of any underground or independent or super independent artists that we may not, have heard of. So with that in mind, at number 3, we are staying in the TDE wheelhouse with newcomer Doechii and her album Alligator Bites Never Heal. I'm so amazed at how well together this album is and how Doechii shows her incredible range throughout. You can not only hear the hunger in her voice, but also the variety as she gives you a bit of everything pertaining to hip hop, from the dark tones of Stankapoo to the anger and threatening nature of Bullfrog to the intricate layers of past and modern boom bap of Boiled Peanuts to the very intrinsic Denial is a River, which is an amazing song, to more of the anger in Catfish, all the way to the very oxymoronic song Boom Bap, where she contemplates doing old school rap, sing rap, or just singing. And truth be told, she just wants to do what feels good to her. And of course, there's Nissan Altima, which shows off Doechii's lyrical speed and prowess as a female MC. One of the best parts of this album is Doechii is just as animated in her lyrics as she is in person, and it plays a part in her growing fame and notoriety. But the most important part of this album is Doechii shows she's not afraid to talk about meaningful topics regarding Blackness, fame, exes, be they male, female, or otherwise, the kind of music she wants to make versus what's popular, and struggles with self-worth. This album deserves all the accolades and deserves more than what it has received so far. I seriously, out of all the albums that have been nominated for a Grammy this year, as far as in the rap category, this the one. This the one, at least in my opinion. All right, y'all. That was number 3. Coming in at number 2, and it was it was a very, very, very close race to the finish, is Chromacopia by Tyler, the Creator. Now, Tyler has grown a lot since his Goblin days, and good thing too, because those raps used to legit scare me. And this album provides a look into Tyler's life, but from the perspective of his mother's lessons, finally locking in at age 33. Tyler has a way to create this beautiful blend of the music and storytelling from start to finish. This album takes on themes of self-care, which not dissimilar to albums like Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and maturity into adulthood. Tyler starts us off with the beautiful track Saint Chroma, then goes into Braggadocio of Ratata, then falls back into self-realization and paranoid thoughts on Noid. Excuse me. We then move to more of the beautiful sounds of Darling I featuring Tizo Touchdown, which plays like a 90s rap ballad, to the fears of parenthood in Hey Jane. Another track that really took me out was Judge Judy, which tells the story of a girl who Tyler does not judge despite whatever actions she takes, even down to the action of taking her own life. Sticky plays like a hype song, and I know plenty of HBCU marching bands that have gotten their musical pens ready for their own arrangements for that one. Take Your Mask Off is a song dealing with trying to hide who you are and what crutches and vices you lean on to avoid your own responsibilities. Two of the tracks toward the end really stick out to me. First is Like Him. Like Him is a ballad of Tyler's mom, where Tyler confronts his mom about, how her treatment of him as if he's his absent father and how he's doing all he can to avoid not being like him. And a surprise twist at the end is where we hear Tyler's mom take the blame for chasing his father away, saying he did want to be present, but because of her, he's not involved anymore. Not to say that that's really not an excuse. You should still be involved no matter how the other parent acts, or at least attempt to connect with your children. But listen, that's out of my jurisdiction, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, the last track, I Hope You Find Your Way Home, is such a beautiful song, and I think it relates to all of us who may have fallen by the wayside or have done things that might have upset our parents, or have gotten advice from our parents that didn't click until we ourselves became adults and figured out what they were talking about. Overall, this album was just phenomenal. It was incredible. Like, I'd seriously trying to decide between the top three, what was going to be number one, number two, and number three was very, very difficult, despite my fandom of the number one album, but you'll see in a minute. But seriously, if you have not listened to Chromacopia by Tyler, the Creator, do yourself a huge, huge, huge favor and go listen. And coming in at number one, I mean, come on, what did you expect? Was there any ever doubt? Well, there was a little bit of doubt, just a tiny bit, but still, was there ever any doubt? 2024 was the year of Kendrick, and he ends the year off by giving us the surprise album GNX. Now, GNX is more or less one of his more simpler albums, and let me start by saying this: is GNX as complex and dense as his other projects like Mr. Morale or To Pimp a Butterfly or even Damn? No. Is it as conceptual and experimental as his previous work like Section 80 or Good Kid, Mad City or To Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, and Mr. Morale? No. But where GNX succeeds is giving the audience the mass appeal they were looking for with Kendrick while still having deep subject matter. In other words, if you said that Kendrick could not make bops and that he could not make anthems, if Not Like Us didn't prove that to you, this album certainly did. And it shows that Kendrick can make the music you want him to make. He just chooses to make music that means something to him. And I just want to be sure that everybody has that understanding. But he does decide to give the audience a little bit of, what they looking for. You know what I'm saying? So what GNX does is present Kendrick as releasing the anger and vitriol he was facing throughout the year and turning it into an ode to West Coast hip hop, both past and present. And by comparison, just to show you what a GNX is a Buick Grand National Experimental that was considered a top of the line coupe for its time and one of the fastest cars out there in 1987. This car was built to be the best and the scariest, and it falls right into the theme of Kendrick being the best and the proverbial boogeyman of hip hop. While his lyrics are not as complex this time around, he makes that clear in the first track, Whacked Out Murals, that he really just wants y'all to feel this shit, as opposed to just listening to a double entendre, which he's also said in other songs. If I'm not mistaken, in The Heart Part 2, he says, we used to beefing over turf, F beefing over a verse, niggas dying, mother F a double entendre. And then in Poor Man's Dreams, he said, I know rappers using big words to make their similes curve. My simple shit be more pivotal. So he really tries to keep this lyricism as simple without it being like too simple. He does still want you to think, or at least he wants to tell his stories in ways that you can understand. So yes, the lyrics might be tuned down just a tiny bit, but not enough to where it's on any of the bottom feeders styles. If you get what I'm saying, if you pick it up what I'm putting down. So all 12 tracks, in my opinion, no skips. I'm sorry, no skips. Even tracks that you might consider skipping, I don't know, like maybe G and X, it just doesn't stay too long for you to do so. It really just gets in and out the paint, for real. Whacked Out Murals is such a great hard-hitting intro. You know, we then get Squabble Up, which of course samples Debbie Debs When I Hear Music. We go into Luther, which samples the incredible duet between Luther Vandross and Cheryl Lynn with If This World Were Mine. And at the same time, of course, he has SZA on the track, and it is such a beautiful duet. We get Kendrick's One Mic moment with Man at the Garden. We, of course, skipping ahead a bit, I wanted to talk about Reincarnated, which again, I've talked to ad nauseum on one of my other podcast episodes. Go listen to it. But still, Kendrick's storytelling is once again on full display as he addresses the story of three people who the devil has reincarnated as, and one of them being Kendrick himself. And then Dot starts introducing some West Coast artists we need to pay attention to. Of course, Dodie Six comes in hot on Hey Now. Lefty Gunplay adds in an incredible refrain on TV Off. And honestly, what more can I say about TV Off other than... Okay. All right. Roddy Ricch, Wally the Sensei, and C7X take us for a ride in Dodger Blue. And from my personal standpoint, Dodger Blue should have been longer. I'm sorry, Kendrick. You should have made that song longer. AZ Chike provides the grit on Peekaboo. And of course, we get Hit of J3, Peso, and Young Thread on GNX, which oddly enough is a track where Kendrick only provides the chorus. He does not provide a verse except for one bar in Hit of J3's bars. They were just kind of crazy. But anyway, Kendrick, of course, then gives us the real Heart Part 6, which clears that trash ass version that the boy gave us. As he reminisces about his come up in TDE and how we always maintain family vibes and love, even as his desires in the industry changed. This song, of course, which samples Use Your Heart by SWV, hits in a very different way for me because that is one of my favorite SWV songs. So of course this song gets a whole lot of love from me. And finally, Gloria is an ode to both his muse Whitney and his writing pen as he details the struggles and constant back and forth relationship he has with him. And what's also unique is that Kendrick once again borrowed a singer to help narrate the album, this time being Dayra Barrera, who is a mariachi singer. Overall, this surprise album by Kendrick dropped like another nuke out of nowhere. And the overall production by Ryan Antonoff, the lyricism, the features, the vibes of this album this is why this sits at my number one spot. If you want to hear more about how I feel about the album, like track by track, and how I go like in depth into these tracks, be sure that you check out episode 6, season 6, episode 6 of the Chaotic Culture podcast. Yeah. Whew. All right, guys, we've made it to the end. So with that, I definitely wanted to thank each and every one of you for tuning in to this episode and for listening to my viewpoints. I think that I have a comprehensive list of hip-hop albums that really not only caught my attention, but I just think are the best. If you disagree with anything, definitely let me know. Let me know in the comments on social media. If you are watching this on YouTube, let me know in the comments on YouTube what your favorites were. And if there's something that I might have missed that I didn't talk about within this video, again, just be sure that you hit me up and let me know. If there are any albums that you think I should just pay like real attention to, then definitely let me know as well. I want to be sure that I can listen to as much music as possible, though I know that it's virtually impossible because there's just so much rap out there. There's so much hip hop. There's so much music in general. Like the industry itself is just saturated with a lot of music. and there's no way for us to listen to it all or cover it all. I know that there are some albums that I missed, especially from the UK hip hop scene, but these are the albums that meant the most to me, and I wanted to be sure that I shared it with everyone as we close out 2024 and enter 2025. And even though 2025 has a lot of unknown variables attached to it, I just want to say go into this year with renewed mind, renewed spirit, and for lack of a better way to say this, just go get the money. But also use music as a way to express yourself and to keep you grounded. I will say that music has definitely played a major role in my life. And if I did not have music, I do not know where I would be. Yes, theater is my first love. Yes, speaking to you guys is something that I thoroughly enjoy. Yes, films, anime, all of that has a love within me. But when it comes to this music and when it comes to hip hop, this is something that touches my soul. And I just want to be sure that I could share that gift with everybody. Now, of course, if you're not a lover of hip hop, then I mean, this may not be the video for you. But if you know someone who loves hip hop as much as I do, then definitely recommend this video to them. Let them know what they think, or ask them what they think about my top 25 and my honorable mentions. And then if you've got some more music that you want to dump on me, feel free to get me hit, because again, I want to be sure that I can digest as much music as possible. Now, this really turned out to be a video essay. I damn near typed up 10,000 words or 13 pages single space just to give this comprehensive list a chance, for real. I wanted to go into this video with actually having some structure instead of going off the top of my head, because I knew that with so much music to cover, there was no way I was going to remember every little single thing that I liked about the albums that I chose. So it was important for me to write that down, so that way I could have that reference point, if you will, to show me, hey, this is why you liked this album. These are some standout tracks you can talk about. These are the themes, and this is what the album was about. So that definitely helped me a lot. And I appreciate you guys sticking around for this episode as well. This took forever to put together from writing it to recording it to making sure I had all the album covers together to be sure that we went down that list. And it's a lot, guys. I'm tired, and hopefully I get a chance to enjoy my new year. But with that being said, I am going to do this rundown real quick. And in hopes of a brighter new year, I implore you all to just continue to be yourself. And for my Black people, continue to fight. We got a long way to go. And the next 4 years it's going to be something. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to be something. But anyway, big shout out to Shogo High and Inside the Mind of a Blurred. Big shout out to Mike Check, Waifu, Worst Generation Pod, and Anime Pod. Shout out to the Truth and Transparency Podcast with Brother X, the Cultural Scientist, and Mr. Smith. Big shout out to Kay Renee. She just reached 250K pages read, so definitely keep writing. Definitely keep putting out those novellas. We appreciate you, Sedona Rose. Of course, It's So Real with Raquel and Onaji. Dad Needs to Talk with Rob the Father of Vash. Analytical, where shit gets critical. Geekset Podcast, Anime Junkies 3, Weaves in a Podcast, Those Anime Girls, The Commute, and Black Geek Energy. Big shout out to Jared. He has been checking up on me, making sure that I was okay as far as getting this list out. So big shout out to you, Jardo. I really appreciate you checking in, bro. For our content creators, of course, Off Black Mag with Aaron, HBCU Anime with Evan, Sunari with Erica, Cerberus Entertainment. Big shout out to Tatted Poodle and the Geeky Gamer, who are streamers. Big shout out to the gang of Hubtaku. They had to, make a few changes, and they're closing their doors for a little bit, but big shout out to them. I know that they will come back stronger than ever. Big shout out to Shelby with Simply Janine, Simply Baked, and Rose Less Traveled. Strange Keith, with Idols to Icons, Toasty Marshmallow, and of course our wonderful Corner 5 with Simone, Courtney 5, Chris, and Sham. And big shout out to Scuba Steve and Alpha with Birdmont Productions. For our Black artists, again, shout out to our very own NASA, Shout out to Scoozy, Jack Union, Phil.me, Ellis Quinn, RJ Stackhouse, Porter, Tyrone Leak Jr., Ari Lachelle, Zach Hines, The Fortresses, Elena, Zainab, and Imogen. And for our Black businesses, already paid by Dre, KSS Brand by Christina, Cream Cosmetics by Naima, Mind Over Money by Tremaine, Studio Maho by Pat and Yin, Concept Moon, She Designs 2 by Aaron, Black Magic / Lit Wands by Lowen T, H4 Creative by Zenobia, Real Estate Stone by Meredith, Sold by Belmont Mariah, GVGVO by NASA, and of course, Scrappy Sentiment by Sappy. And if, of course, you're wondering where I got this shirt from, shout out to my boy Shadow. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was a 10 out of 10. No notes. I got this shirt from Ozzy Oz the Virus. He definitely makes beautiful, wonderful canvases of anime, gaming characters, and cartoon characters just in general. Like, if you haven't checked his stuff out, please be sure that you do so. But not only the canvases, he also makes dope clothing as well. I can't really plug him because I'm not sponsored by him, but I definitely wanted to shout him out for this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful shirt of my boy Shadow the Hedgehog. You already know what time it is anyway. So with that, be sure that you like, share, and subscribe to the Chaotic Culture Podcast on your favorite DSP. Once again, subscribe to the Patreon for early access to the podcast and bonus episodes, and you can subscribe at any of the 4 levels at patreon.com/Chaotic Culture Pod. Of course, you can follow us on Facebook at Chaotic Culture Podcast. You can follow us on IG and on Threads at Chaotic Culture Pod. You can follow us on X/Twitter if you want at Chaotic Culture 1. You can follow us on Blue Sky at chaoticculture.bsky.social. And you can follow me, Ked the Pro. That's K3D the Pro on all social medias. You can follow Miss Sappy at Scraps14 on all social media. You can follow Scuba Steve at Scuba Steve 1428 on all social media. You can follow my boy Law at L.JR_96 on IG and Law96 on Twitter. You can follow Miss Nasa and I'm Nakaso on all social media. Of course, you can follow Jay at Jaylee Trey on all social media. This has been another edition of the Chaotic Culture Podcast. So until next time, folks, remember, embrace the culture, chaos rules, be blessed, be safe, God is love, and I am out of here. Deuces.
Chaotic culture, that's the world we living in. So what's the word?